When we heard he escaped with Dr. Nandipha Magudumana, we've called on them humbly, for wherever they are, that they must hand themselves over to the nearest law enforcement agencies with the intention to negotiate plea bargains, because there is a plea bargain that you can negotiate, so that someday when justice is done, the court could, under mitigating circumstances, be lenient. We called on them to hand themselves over and open the floodgates and tell us everything they know, because they are the two that knows everything. But they didn't take that fool's advice. Now ultimately they are arrested, and maybe it is not too late to negotiate the plea bargain and tell us who else could be involved, because it could not only just the two of them. What people are saying is, because this guy seemingly had deep pockets, he was influential, and he knew people, or he know people in right places and in very powerful places. That is why he could do as he pleased. And by the way, that is a private prison.
What was your first reaction when you picked up and heard that there's a prisoner called Thabo Bester who escaped from a maximum security private prison in South Africa?
Well, this Thabo Bester thing didn't come as a surprise to us, because late last year we used to receive WhatsApp texts. By the way, we, against all odds, and we're still fighting that struggle, that cell phones must be legalized in prisons. They must be legitimized, they must be controlled, they must be recorded, and they must be censored and monitored. We receive information from our structure, who consist of members, followers, sympathizers, and admirers, that there is a cell that burned, and there's a prisoner that committed suicide. And they could not understand how could that prisoner commit that suicide, because they've heard petrol was used, and they could also smell, in the corridors, that there was a substance that smelled like petrol that was used to set alight that cell. And a person that was in there, they're very suspicious that it could not be Thabo Bester, because Thabo Bester was one guy that roomed the prison as if he was the owner of the prison, who had everybody, both correctional officers and prisoners, at the palm of his hands. So we received that information, but not the details. The details are only coming out now. And by the way, we have created a WhatsApp group for the minister and everybody else whom we have their cell numbers. The provincial commissioner, the area commissioner, the directors, the media, the Judicial Inspectorate and Correctional Services, the South African Human Rights Commission, and even families of prisoners. We created a WhatsApp group, and we used to share this information. And when we heard and got the details of this Thabo Bester saga, we then immediately, it started to make sense. It's not as if they did not know from the minister's office. Even the president's office is on our WhatsApp group. They cannot tell us that they didn't know nothing about it.
But how would this happen, that a prisoner has prison officials at the palm of his hands? Is this something called, how does it happen?
There's a saying that says, when money talks, greeds listen. You can go anywhere in the world. These prisoners that got big, long, endless pockets end up, some of them, buying the prison. You must have heard of this drug lord in Colombia, who built his own prison, and run that prison. You can go anywhere in the world as long as you have the money. You will end up first buying corrupt correctional officers, and some of them will tell you that the reason we are involved in this clandestine activities, we make more money than our salaries. They will tell you that they are overworked, they are underpaid, they are overtaxed, and soon they will be over the hill. That is where it starts,
So you'd say, when they raise these things, does it make it easy for them to be bribed?
Of course, yes. If you are corrupt and you work for a system where the minister, the powers that be, don't care about you in terms of remuneration, in terms of your treatment, in terms of your condition under which you work, and the kind of training that you must get in order to be a rehabilitator rather than a prison warder that is in fact influenced and instigated to do the skop, skit, slan and donor thing with opening the cells and closing the cells, you understand? I mean, you have a correctional services where the majority of prison warders are members of a union called the Police and Prison Civil Rights Union, whom they told us these people have sold them out, they've betrayed them, and they're all by themselves.
We've also heard stories of this guy being in and out of prison while he was still incarcerated. How possible is it for someone to have such a lifestyle inside, but they are able to go outside?
Well, I personally used to I've made submissions to the TRC during the heydays where prisoners were taken out by night to go and get involved in political violence when there was this ANC and IFP political violence. I went and made submissions, but nothing came of it. And some of these guys came out of prison someday and started talking about it, that yes, they were used to go and get involved into political violence whilst they are in prison. So, I mean, people would never believe that, you understand, because you're out at night and you do whatever you want, you become a gang warlord, and then you're back in the cell early the following day. For us, we're not surprised, we're not outraged, and we're not shocked, you know, because we've heard the stories long before the Thabo Bester saga.
What are some of the specifics that your people inside that prison in Mangaung have been telling you about the Thabo Bester issue?
Yes, some of the things that were informed to us as an organization, and particularly to me directly, because I am the administrator of this WhatsApp group. It's that in Broadway Street, this is a section that is made out of isolation cells where one person stays in a cell. That a particular cell, which a certain prisoner, we were not given the name, that a certain prisoner has committed suicide by setting himself alight in that cell. And they are very suspicious that this cell belonged to this privileged prisoner who is in fact treated with kid gloves, you know. But it now makes sense that when they informed us, this is through texts and voice notes, that the whole section was smelling of petrol, and they were very suspicious that this was an inside job and a setup. Okay, and we sent this WhatsApp texts to people who are on our WhatsApp groups, and nothing came of it. And by the way, I need also to put on record that the minister blocked us. You know, almost when you send a WhatsApp, there's one right tick that is gray. It means that you've been blocked. Then there are two gray right ticks. It means that the person has received it but didn't open it. Then there is two blue ticks. It means the person has received it, opened it, and read it. And we have realized that the minister is one of them that blocked us. Some of the correctional officers, well, as soon as we get your cell number and you're a correctional officer, we put you on a group. You can remove us from the group, but we will send privately this kind of information. So those who never read our texts, those who never listened to our voice notes, did that out of their own ignorance, out of their own risk, and out of their own periphery.
Which minister are you talking about?
I'm talking about Ronald Lamola. And we have so many times since he took office tried to have a meeting with him so that he could learn from Izinja's game or Miles Bhudu. We should have at least, it's not only me, there are many Miles Bhudus outside here, but none of them are prepared to risk their lives and risk their livelihood for speaking out, talking out, and be rebellious for the right reasons.
Why would you think he'd block you? Why do you think is the reason behind that?
The reason behind blocking us and not wanting to have anything to do with this organization, it's because whoever started this organization, like Abu Miles Bhudu, is not part of them. One. Number two, the organization is not a puppet for any political ideology. The organization is independent and it is driven by the Bill of Rights, and it is registered as a non-profit independent prisoners' rights organization. And I also think, and I'm very suspicious, the reason why the organization has suffered is because of Miles Bhudu consistency, who refused to be corrupted, who refused to give up, who refused to be captured and speak his mind, write what he likes, say what he wants, and is prepared to take any hiding, if there's any, or suffer any consequences for that matter. And Miles Bhudu is no apologist.
I've heard people say in media that this escape of Thabo Bester is a big deal and it's a big operation. It can't have just involved prison officials. It must have involved top people in government, must have involved top politicians. What is your take on people that are saying that? What are your people inside the prison saying about this escape?
What people are saying is because this guy seemingly had deep pockets, he was influential, and he knew people, or he know people in right places and in very powerful places. That is why he could do as he pleased. And by the way, that is a private prison. It's supposed to be one of the model prisons that we were told after 25 years there will be a rollout to other prisons, public prisons, how to run these prisons, because Kutama Sentimule, which is a private prison in Limpopo, and Mangaung G4S, which is also run along the lines of the United Kingdom penal system, was the systems that will be used in the future, how to run prisons that will educate, train, skill offenders so that they get rehabilitated and reintegrated as law-abiding and useful citizens. And just see now what has happened. And it is not as if that was the first escape. We know of two other escapes that has been covered up. And we also know that when a prisoner escaped from Mangaung or Kutama Sentimule, the fine is almost R1 million against the institution. So those prisons, these two prisons, are never overcrowded, neither are they undercrowded. We are told that these two prisons share 5,945 prisoners. And we are told these two prisons, one prison per day, the taxpayer pops out 432 rands for Mangaung and 419 rands for Kutama Sentimule and 385 rands in the ordinary public prisons. This is money, huge, big money that change hands. And we are told most of the shareholders of these two companies are ANC bigwigs. Take, for instance, in Bloemfontein, we are told a former mayor, Kgosi Mampuru, was one of the shareholders, or is one of the shareholders. And I'm not sure, but I've overheard that this Kgosi Mampuru is now re-elected as a mayor of Mangaung, but representing another political party. And Alebogang Mokoena, I'm told it is the son of Kgosi Mampuru, who are main shareholders of Mangaung G4S, maximum security prison. It's a mess. And it's about time that the people get a wake-up call and say something and do something about it. Because I have, for 34 years after my imprisonment, sing the same old song. We are now currently talking with business people. We're currently talking with academics to come on board. We are very excited to have now a relationship with a company called the Family Mkwena Family Trust Fund, who in fact I'm told will be responsible of building hospitals throughout the provinces in the country, and they are prepared to come on board to assist us financially, materially, humanly, and infrastructurally to keep the issues of prisoners, crime and violence on the political agenda.
Who should be held accountable for these escapes and this blunder that has put the country on a world map for nothing great, for an embarrassing moment in our prison facility?
We as an organization, few weeks ago, we called for the minister's head to roll, because that is where the bucks start and it is where the buck stop. And everybody that surrounds him, if they don't want their heads to roll, they can put them on leave, compulsory leave with or without pay. And if they are exonerated someday, that they can be reinstated. Because we know, it's a known fact that there are people that have sit at home for 6 years with full pay, and after 6 years be reinstated. And we're wondering, why can't this happen with the minister? I'm saying this? It's very interesting, because when the late Ananias Mate escaped from CMEX, Pretoria, and there are only 2 CMEXs in this country. The one is in Pretoria, Kgosi Mampuru, the second, Epongweni, the other one is in Kokstad. Okay? And South Africa is in this fashion. They go and copycat 2 maximum prisons, America and England, and they go and copycat 2 CMEX prisons, America and England. And they would never come with projects, these prisons in developed and civilized society are in fact implementing to get prisoners rehabilitated through the investment of education, training and skills development. Isn't it funny? Ananias Mate escaped from CMEX, we are told, using a bottle of Vaseline, and there were no consequences up to today. And the person who is a spokesperson that made that laughable statement, he was not dealt with. In fact, he was elevated to go and be a spokesperson in the National Assembly in Cape Town. Now, because there wasn't previously consequences, I don't think the message was sent that we also need consequences here. If there were consequences then by a person escaping from a very secured isolation, solitary confinement section using a bottle of Vaseline, nothing happened. Do you think something will happen if we do not keep our knee on their necks?
How safe do you think Thabo Bester is now at Kgosi Mampuru with everything that is surrounding his escape, and how this has embarrassed the Department of Correctional Services?
The Department of Correctional Services is indeed embarrassed. And they would do everything humanly possible to try and keep on covering up. The life of Bester is not safe, because he might sing like a canary someday and implicate everybody. And it is unfortunate that when we heard he escaped with Dr. Nandipha Magudumana, we've called on them humbly, for wherever they are, that they must hand themselves over to the nearest law enforcement agencies with the intention to negotiate plea bargains, because there is a plea bargain that you can negotiate, so that someday when justice is done, the court could, under mitigating circumstances, be lenient. We called on them to hand themselves over and open the floodgates and tell us everything they know, because they are the 2 that knows everything. But they didn't take that fool's advice. Now ultimately they are arrested, and maybe it is not too late to negotiate the plea bargain and tell us who else could be involved, because it could not only just the 2 of them. We are not even sure up to so far at which mortuary was that corpse collected from, and what happened with the owners, the shareholders of that mortuary, who carried that corpse into back of a bakkie or into a boot. How did it get into the main entrance, and from the main entrance get into the section, and from the section get into the cell? These are things that still need to be told But the person that can tell us could be just the two of them. And here's another fool's advice. Let them check whether it is not too late to get into a plea bargain and open the floodgates.
Don't you find it interesting that it is said that Thabo Bester does not have an ID or something along those lines? But how do you get into the prison system without these identikits? Don't you need to be fingerprinted? Don't you have to capture your details, your identity details? Doesn't that sound strange to you?
That doesn't sound really strange to me because of the caliber we are told who Bester is. This is how the system works. The day you get arrested, your fingerprints are taken and photos are also taken. And immediately your fingerprints are double checked whether you don't have an outstanding case or whether you are not a fugitive of the law or maybe you got outstanding cases. I mean, I cannot understand how could they miss all that right from the day he was arrested up to the day you go into the system. When you go into the system, the Department of Correctional Services has got also their own administration, taking your fingerprints, taking photos of you, and put it into what is called a communal warrant of your arrest to justify your stay or your incarceration at that particular prison. And are you saying to me that has also been missed? Something is not right here. We need to start right up there to get to the bottom of this matter.
What advice would you give the minister? Say he opens up to you, he says, Mr. Miles Bhudu, come on board, help us. What advice would you give them?
Well, the advice that we would give him is to read our recognition and procedural agreement. Take it to his lawyers, because he's a lawyer himself, and see whether the recognition and procedural agreement that we've been yearning for 34 years will stood the test of the time in terms of not contradicting the Correctional Services Act, not contradicting the Criminal Justice Act, and not contravening or working against the Constitution of this country. And if he has satisfied him with that, then I would advise him to say, look, you don't have to give me any position in your office. Just use me as your street-like advisor. And there are many of us. You should have done that right from the beginning, as I said earlier on. Alandetina isn't just a game. So that we advise him outside where he is, because he is like in a cocoon. The people that advise him and surround him tells him exactly what he wants to hear. And we would not do that because we are not in the system. And in fact, we are saddened because prisoners are potential voters. We have called for the Department of Correctional Services to allow prisoners to vote openly, freely, democratically, and not sabotage them by saying to them, look, if you don't have an ID, you can't register. If you want a temporary ID, you will have to pay anything between 80 to 110 rands.
Your parting shot, we hear, and this has revealed the corruption within our system, the correctional services system. Your parting shot as an organization, what is your last word to the people of South Africa and prisons in South Africa?
Our last word would be, people must now wake up. They don't have to become prisoners and victims' right activists, but they must wake up to ask questions, because it is their taxpayers' monies that makes this department to run.